Everybody wants to coach, stick to the sidelines. Everybody wants to get a step from my riders. Wilding out, trying to nick them a riot. I've been on the line and I don't really care if they say that I'm local. Every day on the street, every track, every beat, just as long as you go down. I'm living la vida loca. I'm pulling up in the local.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are listening in from. Welcome to No Movements, No Power, the next installment in Jazz's Just Power Dialogues. We do have interpretation today in English, Spanish, and Indonesian, so choose your channel. Some of you will remember that we began this dialogue series during the pandemic, or right when it started, actually, and we felt a really acute need for political community and spaces for political conversation on the critical issues of the day. And we've continued that tradition, periodically engaging activists in our larger circles in these kinds of important conversations. Today, we're joined by 6 activists, movement builders, popular educators who will be speaking on that theme. Shireen Isaf will be moderating us, our executive director, and we will have space for you to pose questions in the chat. So please keep those in mind and share those when you're ready. Without further ado, here is Shireen to take us into the conversation. Thanks.
Thanks, Alexa, and a warm welcome to you all for joining us today in this conversation that's really going to be focusing on movement building and the importance of FPE as part of thinking about how it is that we reclaim, rebuild, and radicalize democracy. So welcome. We're really excited to be here with you and to be in conversation with our panelists. I think, as we all know, we are living in challenging times. We feel it, we breathe it, we live it every day. I think we also know that as we prepare for this year that is being deemed as the election year globally, that there is really a global crisis of democracy. And, global insecurity, misinformation is really feeding a surge in authoritarian forces backed by significant popular support and the consolidation of power by right-wing interests in an attempt to drive conservative agendas that are excluding, that are discriminatory, and that are violent. And I think we also know that political change will require strong and savvy movements, as it always has. Hence, no movements, no power, no change. And so to kick us off, I really want to put some propositions into the space. I think that for Jazz and for many of you listening in, movements are more than mobilizations. Mobilizations are often difficult to sustain, and movements need a depth of commitment and involvement that is sustained over time. I think we know that change takes time. Movements require a sense of direction, a guiding vision that orients the work towards, a shared goal. They require strong and distributed leadership, a base of active people who are carrying that vision in their organizing and change work. And they also require really diverse allies and alliances that are aligned with and contributing towards the work in their own particular ways. I think historically, movements that have grown and been effective over time have had a political foundation. They're rooted in learning and development that can grow a base of commitment, involvement, leadership capacity, and organizing skills, but also can be rooted in a transformatory vision. And I think the third proposition that I would like to put into the space is that there is an essential link between feminist popular education and long-term power building or movement strengthening. Popular education has been a long tradition in building movements in struggles for liberation, for the overthrow of colonialism. And I think that this tradition and practice has been eroded, over time. In the last 3 decades or so, it's been dismantled and somewhat abandoned, but it is needed now more than ever. And we know that there are overt and covert feminist popular educators in different places and spaces. And I think part of the purpose of this dialogue is to really bring us together into a shared conversation around feminist popular education and movement building. So we're going to spend the next hour and a bit together exploring some of these dimensions. And we're hoping that in doing this, we will really be contributing to the long movement traditions of feminist popular education, because we are gathering, we're sharing, we're learning, and strengthening our capacities, including the solidarities that we are all needing to be able, to do this work for the long term. And so we're going to start with a rapid fire round to just kind of get us going. And so we're going to start with you, Mariella. Please watch the chat. There'll be longer bios of our panelists that will be posted in the chat. But for now, Mariella is a Panamanian educator, economist, public policy planner, and researcher who really centers feminist popular education in building citizen participation, both at national, regional, and I would argue infusing that in the work of building movements at a global level. So welcome, Mariella. Very excited to have you here. And our rapid fire round is going to center on one question for all of our panelists. What is feminist popular education for you, Mariella? And what does it mean in your work? And you have a minute. Over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Feminist popular education is part of my life project. For me, it's a tool for social weaving, for building awareness, and for mobilization. Without feminist popular education, I think that in Panama and in the entire region, we would not have been able to make significant progress in women's lives through public policies. For me, it's a political strategy. It's an efficient political strategy. If it's done correctly, and if it's thoroughly thought out, feminist popular education can be a tool that helps to build political strategic awareness. And it helps to create a transformation. Do I have more time left?
That, but the second panelist that I would like to bring into the conversation and introduce is Laura Zuniga. So Laura, I'm going to ask you to turn on your camera. Laura is from Honduras and has really participated in youth communication and popular education spaces in her community, and I think is dedicated to feminist popular education as a movement practice. So Laura, welcome. And the same question to you. What is feminist popular education and what does it mean to you? And you have a minute.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. For me, feminist popular education is a tool for social transformation. It's a tool to bring about the changes that we want for movements, for collectives, especially for groups that are working to transform the roots of oppressive systems. And feminist popular education helps us to dismantle oppression. It helps us to create generative practices that lead to transformation, to justice, and it helps us to create spaces where we can grow critically. Feminist popular education also helps us to build strategies, especially when we are deconstructing systems of oppression.
Thank you, Laura. And I am going to bring in our third panelist, Kuntia. Kuntia is a feminist popular educator and has worked with Jazz for almost 11 years, supporting us in building not just the organization, but rooting in our feminist popular education traditions and roots. And Kuntia is from Cambodia, and she has supported work both nationally, but also regionally and globally as, I know, a committed feminist popular educator and organizer. So Kuntia, welcome, and over to you. From your vantage, what is feminist popular education and what does it mean for you?
Thank you, Sharit, and hello, everyone. So for me, family popular education is the building the collective learning and collective strategy as well as collective leadership for developing the strategy and to act for change for the better life of the people. So I think this is not really different from what speaker have been said, but I also want to say this is a framework that the feminists adapted from Paulo Freire, which is to really reclaim back the education and the learning that it focused, on some of the group, but not really respect the knowledge from other different groups. So just to add that, and when feminists adapt this framework, we add the intersectional dimension more than the class, because when the Paulo Freire doing it, just focusing on the class, but we adapt it to add another intersectionality dimension like gender, race, age, position, so something like that. So just to add that, Sharon, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kuntia, and for drawing us both to the long traditions of Paulo Freire and the intersectional approach that feminists have taken to popular education in order to be able to deepen and meet the political invitation of both the approach, but also some of the methodologies that we use as feminist popular educators. I'm going to turn to Hope. Hope, better known as the servant of women, is an uncontainable feminist activist with decades of experience in feminist movement building and leadership development and organizational strengthening, both on the African continent, but also globally. And I know, Hope, that you, in a range of different ways, have harnessed the power of feminist popular education in your work. And so to kick off, again, the invitation is for a minute's warm-up. For you, from your vantage, what is feminist popular education and what does it mean?
Thanks, Shereen. For me, feminist popular education is what I learned from my grandmother. Excuse me. Every time she wanted to build a movement, some kind of movement, she ensured that she used the music, she used dance, she used proverbs, and she brought people to sit by the fire so that she could share what she really wanted to share. That way, she was able to use a participatory approach because everyone brought what they had, whatever gifts they had in the conversation. She was able to intersect power dynamics in terms of bringing the young, the old, the in-between together, men, women, and others. She was able to influence just using the, storytelling, music, as I've said, dances, and she was able to build movement. She didn't call it a movement. It was about bringing the community together. It was about bringing villages together so that they could bring about change. That's what popular education means to me. Thank you.
Fantastic, Hope, for reminding us that it's popular education as a method really starts with where we all are at, including our grandmothers and our mothers. So adding that to the collective sort of pot that we are developing in terms of our understandings of feminist popular education. We're going to move next to you, Risha. Risha, welcome. And Risha is joining us. And her scholarship and creative work is really anti-disciplinary. It is cross-border. And I think Risha really agitates stabilized ways of knowing and stabilized ways of knowing and telling through collective creativity while engaging questions of ethics, responsibility, and justice. Again, pay attention to the chat because the longer bios for all of our panelists are being posted there. So Risha, over to you for 1 minute. What does feminist popular education mean to you, and how does it underpin the work that you have been doing over the last number of decades?
Hello. Thank you so much, Shireen. And it's just so beautiful to be here together with everyone. And especially in this revolutionary moment when students on US campuses are once again teaching us that we are always students. And so I think that in a way that connects with how I see feminist popular education. I believe that feminist popular education is that continuous, unstoppable, ever-going education that teaches us how to be I, we, you, and they in a continuous dance in relation to one another, in relation to justice. And this dance of I, we, you, they, it involves dissolving our egos ethically for a shared dream that is always in the making. And also, this dance is one where the singular and the plural, the singular and the collective can both thrive and actually enable and energize each other without stifling one another. So that, I think, to me, is the quick definition of feminist popular education. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Risha. And I would lastly like to bring Jojo into the space. Jojo is a long-time human rights and women's rights activist and former executive director of the Center for Women's Resources in the Philippines. Also had a long history and journey with Jazz, as Jazz has thought about feminist popular education and movement building over the last 2+ decades. So Jojo, welcome. And again, the same question to you for 1 minute. What is your understanding of feminist popular education and its utility for you?
Yes, thank you, Shireen, for that introduction, and good day, everyone. I'm pleased to be here. Thank you, Jazz, for giving me this opportunity to be part of this discussion. For me, the feminist popular education has these certain aspects, like it is popular because we reach to the grassroots communities, and because it's the grassroots, it should be understandable with tools that are innovative and creative so that they would understand it. And it's also sometimes using experiential so that it would be firsthand and they would understand it more. And the goal is for social change, as what every one of the panelists had said. But this is the application. We are also encouraging them to have this analysis through a gender lens perspective. And we also encourage problem solving. So every time that there's an education or knowledge building, we encourage to, at the end, we do some work plan that they could work on after the FPE. That's it. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Jojo. So we've got a set of things in the space that conceptually and practically, I think we can work with during the course of the dialogue. We've got the meaning of space as, brave and radical spaces for learning and unlearning, for reweaving, right, who and what we are in relation to each other in our quest for liberation and for freedom, essentially. We also have a set of things that our panelists have put in the space that is deepening into longer traditions, right, of learning, unlearning, ways of knowing, ways of being, ways of building community. I'd like for you to hold all of those as we go into a second round of deepening this conversation of feminist popular education, specifically now in relation to movement work. And I'd like to invite you, Kuntia, to turn on your video. Thank you very much. So, Kuntia, from your vantage and experience, what does feminist popular education offer activists and movements? And why does this matter, particularly in this moment? I think Risha has reminded us, right, that we are in a specific moment in relation to Palestine, in relation to liberation, in relation to, the polycrises that we are facing in our world that is making life unsustainable in the ways that we know it. And we also know that people are organizing and pushing back. So you have 5 minutes, Kintia. I'm sorry that I'm needing to manage time in this way, but what does FPE offer activists and movements in this moment, and why does it matter right now?
Thank you so much, Shireen. I will try to be in 5 minutes. So I think I have 5 points. I just go straight to the point that I would like to raise here, what the FPE offer. So the first one, I think, just elaborate from what we was discussed about what is FPE. FPE actually is a space that provides the activists and the movement for the collective learning, collective analysis, and also collective leadership, which is using different methodology, like Hope is mentioned, like art, theater, storytelling. So those like simple things that can produce our knowledge together for a strategy development and for a change that we would like to see. And by using the power framework to analyze. And like I mentioned before, that we also looking to a different intersectionality that is how the feminists using the popular education in our spaces is also focusing on action, on organizing and transformation. And also we do the risk mitigation. So that is the first one. The second one, when we have those kind of space, we be able to honor ourselves, because we're living in the system that telling us who you should be, who you are. But the space that the FPA really provides to honor ourselves, to be who we are, and be able to value the knowledge and the experience that we have. Even we are the farmer, even we are the sex worker, we have the same value as other people. And the third is about the co-creation and co-leadership. This is really important, how we share our leadership, how we share our power, because we would like to have a better, different world. We're not just only to replace from the man leader to the woman leader, but we would like everyone really understand the power dynamic and share those within the group that we are working, and to the better world and for everyone, not just only men and women. And the fourth one is about healing and the self-care. I think the space that we provide with storytelling, the art, and those kind of is really healing, because a lot of us, especially women, we really deep a lot of trauma, a lot of violence that we're facing. So those space really providing a healing space and the self-care for all of us by we using the holistic approach, heart, mind, body in the space. And also we build a collective sense of belonging and where we are. We are not just alone. And I think the last one I would like to mention is very important. Is about inspiration, hope, and solidarity. Because when we're living in this system right now, like we have mentioned, we mostly really getting very hopeless. We're like, okay, what can I do? Is this too much? Is this too big? But I think there will be the way. There is a possible way that we can do. There is an alternative space that we can create, even like it is small. But if we disrupt the current system, the current power dynamic, this is something that is new. So I think this is the 5 points that I would like to raise what the FPE offer to the activists and why it matters. Because that, I think the first one is because it's from us. And we are the one that facing with those issues, impact by that issue. So no one knows the issue more than us. So it starts from us. And the FPE is not a hierarchy. It's a reality of life. It's a reality of us. So it starts from our mind, heart, body, so that it to really develop, and then we are the force of the change, because we are at the ground. We understand the issue. We know how the solution that should be. So to create the space for us to do those kind of jobs, we will become the force of the change. And the second one, FPE is play a really several role. not just only for the capacity building, but for the strategic development, for building the alliance, for family leadership, when we have deep understanding about family popular education, we can adapt it in different space. When we have a meeting with the UN, how to make sure that who are the center of that issue, who we should, represent in that issue. It's not us that, don't have knowledge, deep knowledge on that issue. So how we adapt those tools in different space and different strategy that we advocate for. So, and then the third one, I think, is matter because building the relationship of trust is very important. And if we don't have, and trust is a heart of collective power. And if we don't have trust, we could not build the collective power for change. So if we don't have space, we would not able to build trust. So the space that provides is able to really build the trust. And as right now, a lot of division in our society, the feminists, the activists. So how are we building the trust that we can build that collective power? And then the fourth one is we share a vision, a vision that we would like to see the better world. And the last one is a share of sense of what possible that it should be. So that's it from me, Shireen. Thank you.
Thank you, Kuntia. So I'm really hearing you center a couple things, Kuntia, that I think are important in this conversation. Really starting from where women and or communities are at, right? By creating spaces to allow and facilitate, right, people to come together for a number of reasons, both what I'm hearing you say, a reweaving of a social fabric that can really allow for thinking about transformation, for centering solutions that communities may already, right, be living into, but also using an analysis of power to feed strategy and action that allows for the movement from an individual, right, an individual recognition and understanding of who I am, to something that can build towards a sustained collective. And so in that way, I'm hearing in what you're saying that FPE is both an approach to movement work, and it also is a set of methodologies that can facilitate, right, the strengthening, the developing of shared analysis that can feed strategy and action. I'd like to bring you into the conversation, Mariella, because I know that you've been working for several years to engage hundreds of people across Panama to vision and build movement leadership towards a more equitable and just future. And, the move from the individual to the collective is an important one when we think about movement building and the aim of building collective power or counterpower. Can you tell us, Mariella, how and why you used feminist popular education in this work that you were so centrally a part of?
Mariela says, I'm having trouble turning on my camera. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that question. This is a very broad question. It made me think about 30 years ago when we began this process. Back then, we didn't even call it Feminist Popular Education. Feminist Popular Education has evolved since Paulo Freire. We realized that Freire's FPE didn't name everything that we were experiencing, especially in the process of political education. At that time, there were even misogynist and machista practices within popular education in the 80s. Therefore, it wasn't easy to name it as a feminist practice, and it wasn't easy to call ourselves feminists. At that time, the approach to popular education was very orthodox. However, today we can use the word feminist. It's a result of the work we've done. We've named what we've been doing for more than 30 years, almost 40 years now. Back then, we didn't have words to describe the work we were doing. There was a lot of fear when it came to doing things differently back then. I started to think about the path that we were following. There's a lot of similarities with what Kuntea shared. We realized that we weren't getting the results we were expecting in terms of change, and that's because there was a lack of public policies to protect our rights. Now that means that the collective awareness an awareness of the need to create change. For example, when it comes to creating public policy for women's rights in Panama, that's something that didn't exist before. So we went from a process of collective awareness to one of collective action. We came together, we joined forces. These were women that were working together for years. We created a weave based on trust built throughout the years. It was based on a relationship of respect. We knew each other well, we respected each other, and we also respected our differences. And it was through collective action that we were able to create a methodology. That methodology helped us to feel safe. It made us visible because we were coming from a situation of social invisibility. So first, we increased our own visibility. There was no hierarchy. There wasn't anyone who knew more than anyone else. We all learned together and built together. We built new ways of learning that were useful to create strategies and to create a political path for the future. That was the first political transformation that we experienced. We transformed ourselves. We transformed our leadership style. We transformed the way that we related with each other, the way that we looked and perceived at each other. That was the very first transformation that took place for us through feminist popular education. It was a process of internal transformation. It helped us to develop our capacities to then build collective power. That was the most important step. It gave us the awareness that when you start a process, when you initiate a process to move towards advocacy and a political struggle, you won't be able to achieve absolutely everything. But the most important strategic achievement happens when you build that trust through collective work and when you make that commitment to creating change. After that, we were able to have a significant impact on women's lives because we went from a local micro level to having a much bigger impact at a collective level. That means that even if we didn't have an immediate change at a political level, that deeper change had already started to take place. This process is not linear. It operates at multiple levels. For example, one of them is research. We had to do a lot of research. We also had to dedicate ourselves to communication internally and externally. It also requires a level of systematization in order to make improvements. There's also a level of creativity in creating new methodologies. It helped us to apply traditional knowledge in an urban setting. It helped us to use technology and to share technology with women living in rural communities. That's an exchange that continues to take place. We signed also a political agreement, a political pact a few days ago, and it's the result of work we've been doing for many years. Thousands of women came. It's very expensive to bring that many people to the capital city. And all these women signed this political pact. In 6 days, there will be an election. And this was part of the ritual that takes place with every election. Whenever there's an election, we go through the same process. And the most important thing for us is not for the presidential candidates necessarily to sign the pact for equality with women. We know they'll sign it because it's part of the electoral process and they're demagogues. However, the most important aspect of all of this is the collective process we go through. It's an opportunity to come together, to laugh together, to cry, to dance, and to feel and see that we're not alone, just like Kuntea said. That power of being together, that transformative power, is something that no one can take away from us. That's worth more, so much more, than any public policy that's poorly carried out, because they often don't approve or carry out those public policies, and we won't give up. Not even in the context of a neoliberal patriarchal system. That's the most important thing. We were together, we laughed, we danced, and we also laughed at the candidates. The candidates thought that they were going to use us, but we have continued working together. We have continued building collective power, building sisterhood, and spaces for love amongst us. That's my answer.
Perfect. Thank you, Mariela. And thank you for centering the importance of, I guess, what sometimes can be called the intangibles of movements for change. Because I think what you've said as you concluded your sharing, the most important thing is that we were together, right? And I think embedded in that for me is, once you shift consciousness, you're not going to go back. You can't unsee what you've already seen, right? And so wherever you are, then you are an agent for change, right? In the building of and the claiming of something new and different. And so I want to hold that as I invite you into the conversation, Jojo, because I think in the Philippines, we know that movements had to function under dictatorships and repression. And we know that, this has also been, a feature of movement work, unfortunately, across history. I would argue that we are in another such moment writ large, in terms of the meaning of repression as a means of silencing and, dare I say, even eradicating, right? Voices for change. What made this possible in the Philippines? How were movements able to continue to function under dictatorships and repression? And what can we learn from that history that can feed our movement building work today? So over to you, Jojo, to continue building on the conversation.
Yes, I think it's really timely. The discussion is really timely because of the trend of populist dictators. And as for me, the first and foremost reason for this maintenance of movements in the Philippines, even way back during the first dictatorship of Marcos, 1970s. It is the fervor and commitment of the activists and feminists, which really kept them going, gave them courage despite the threat of dictatorship. Often, I could also think of four essential factors why movement building was maintained amid the dictatorship during Marcos's time. One, it's the tireless organizing work. Two, it's the education work or the continuous knowledge building. Three is the assisting and engaging in community activities. And fourth, the international solidarity work. I think the crucial role of community organizing has maintained the existence of movement despite the loss of dictatorship. The Filipino activists who were calling for national sovereignty against foreign domination and for genuine agrarian reform had consciously organized every community across the country, had integrated with the workers and farmers to enlighten them to the national situation. As part of the exploited classes, women had been organized to be part of this struggle since their subjugation and oppression is an outcome of foreign and feudal patriarchal domination. Protests had been widespread, numerous, and regular. One of the active participants of these protest actions was the women organization called Makibaka, or in English, it's struggle, to go forward. Which is the principle of the Filipino woman's place is in the struggle. Threatened by this growing protest and with the intention of staying in power, Ferdinand Marcos declared martial law in 1972. So every activist, every protesting organization was targeted for arrest and annihilation, Makibaka included. But because organizing work in the communities had been deeply entrenched, those who were wanted by the dictator and needed to sidestep were welcomed in the communities, especially in the rural areas. But they did not end in working. Instead, they continuously conducted education work or knowledge building so that the communities would understand their condition and in the end would be part of the struggle. Living with the communities also meant engaging with their activities, working with them, planting with them, even joining them in their fiestas or festivities. In other words, being grounded because at the end of the day, the biggest shield for activists is the people themselves. And dictators know this. That is why they threaten, harass, and even bomb communities, even at present, so as to remove the support system of activists. Fourth is a very important aspect that made the campaign against the dictatorship global, the international solidarity work. Organizations and agencies from different parts of the world had supported the Philippine struggle that really pressured the US government, which was the primary supporter of the Marcos dictatorship. It was a great display of internationalism. I would also add a fifth important aspect. The Philippine liberation movement has ventured into several forms of struggle, from legislations to lobbying, from local networking to international solidarity work, from pens to arms. They knew that to exist in a dictatorship, they had to counter and match the strength of the adversary. And what can we learn from this history? We have a saying in Filipino, I will say it slowly. Ang hindi lumingon sa pinanggalingan ay hindi makakarating sa paroroonan. In English, it means turn back to move forward. Just similar to what Santayana said of those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. We need to look into our past to get lessons and pointers how to operate at present and move forward. So what are these realizations? First, let us continue what our foremothers' strategies and the core essential of organizing, knowledge building, and integrating. The new largest women's organization, Gabriela, has continued to organize women nationwide. And what is interesting is that young women, who are the future of our struggle, are so active in this organization. Second, we should use all forms of struggle, from electoral to lobbying, from national networking to international exchanges, from using the pen to carrying arms. We need to match the force of the enemy. Myanmar, India, the Philippines, Palestine, countries in Africa and Latin America have shown us that fighting for what is right is nobler than not fighting at all. As we are now in the digital age, let us maximize the information and communications technology to our advantage so that we can reach out to more women in a faster way. We need to counter the misinformation of the populist authoritarian regimes, and let us spread the truth, because as the cliche goes, the truth can set us free.
Thank you, Jojo, for adding your thoughts and perspectives, and inviting us in a similar way to Mariela to locate our work in a historical arc. Right. So we are building on traditions of movement work over time. I think one of the things that strikes me in what our three speakers up until this point have shared is that using feminist popular education as a way to build and root in a shared vision and or ideology or an understanding of the kind of world that we are wanting to usher in is critical as building a foundation for the movement work that we are going to do over time. It means we are really steering against a guiding star, right? No matter what it is that we may be facing. I'd like to go to you, Laura, and bring you into the conversation. Jojo has really spoken about, what it means for movements to function under repression or repressive contexts. And thinking about your work, Laura, in Honduras, how has FPE played a role in your work, including in thinking about issues of safety and or collective protection in movements? So over to you.
When I was looking at this question, I asked myself, where should I start? I think I should start by saying that I'm a feminist popular educator that works with jazz. I work with different groups of women that are organized, that have experience with leadership, political formation, and facilitation. In Honduras, it's been interesting to see how collective organization responded to the coup. That was an exercise in political practice and collective action. It wasn't just one organization that came together. There was a national mobilization that happened at that time. And that national mobilization, which took place during several months, well, it was interesting to see that the position that women were taking as feminists that were denouncing and fighting against machista dynamics that we experience every day in our culture here. It's a culture that's dominated by a patriarchal system and that is influenced by a culture of militarization. And the male perspective is reinforced through militarization. We identified a way in which feminist popular education can contribute. It's not just a workshop, it's a practice. For example, in the workshops, we were talking about how to dismantle oppression, how to break down that process. And a popular educator from Argentina was saying that we need to break down the oppression until it's no longer sustainable, which will help us create a change. We need to do this collectively and not in silos. By working collectively, we can take action together, and our actions become part of the context. That context helps us to understand the historical oppression that we've embodied and also the historical resistance that we've inherited. For example, all the learning and wisdom that has been passed down to us. That's an example of a feminist popular education in practice. It's a way of honoring our ancestors. It's a way of honoring the women that have passed on their knowledge and resistance to us. Because the way that women resist comes with its own unique characteristics. As women, we experience and face different kinds of oppression. In terms of security and protection, our experience in Honduras is such that we've had to address the issue of security. A lot of the work that we do has to do with weaving a social fabric and having a dialogue to understand our reality and our potential. We don't see diversity as a threat or as something that destroys us. That's what the system tries to tell us, that because we're different, we need to be on different sides or on different teams. However, when we think about our potential, when we think about diversity, then we can start building together and coming together from a stronger place. Feminist popular education helps us to prevent conflicts as well. By addressing conflicts in a constructive way, we can also build systems of safety, protection, and security. And just lastly, to close, I think it's important to note that within feminist popular education, we not only dismantle oppressive power, but we can also strengthen our ability to create together, to create our own power. I think that's very important. That's something that comes from our very own experiences. That's just a brief summary. There's much more I could say, but that's a bit about my experience working with feminist popular education.
Thank you, Lara. Thank you so much. Hope, I'd like to bring you into the conversation. We've heard a lot about power, from the range of panelists that we've had up until this moment. And if at the heart of building strong movements sits an analysis of power to inform action, how does FPE enable this and feed radical change? Because I think the other thing that we've heard as a thread from all of our panelists up until this point is we needing to live into what it is that we are, or we needing to claim, right, the future now. And I think FPE allows us in some way to do that. So from your perspective and in your work, how have you used FPE to enable this?
Thanks, Shereen. So if you go to places where movements are buried, you'll find that the activists that work in movements died tired, they died wounded, broken. They were hurting, they were drained, they were angry. And when people are that way, it's very difficult to build a movement that feeds, whatever it is that they are trying to feed. So for movements to really, be sustainable, feed those that, work in movements, the activists, there are practices they need to continue doing. And one of those practices is well-being. So we go into these movements as if everything is okay, we are okay. The organizations that go into movements, individuals, groups are okay. But this is not always the case. And sometimes groundwork is not done. So this is one exercise that I'd like to suggest that we can do as we continue with our movements. I want us to imagine a movement as a house. A house, that is present now, but that has got a past and has got a future. Most houses have got rooms, some don't, but many others do. So if you think about a movement and you think about the work we do, sometimes we tend to do it in a room that is doing things the way we know. This is the way things are done. And we don't stop to interrogate what it is that we need to change, or it's status quo. We are going to lobby, we are going to document, we are going to throw stones, we are going to do all these things. But as we are doing this work, we are wounded. As we are doing this work, we are not okay. As we are doing this work, we are coming from backgrounds that are really, really difficult, but rarely do we have time for conversations. So we continue, and in the end, instead of the enemy, we end up shooting one another. And I think activists here know that. When we've turned against one another, how we've shot one another, how bitter we become because we turn against one another because of the anger that we have internalized, anger coming from the pain that we carry. How we hurt one another because of the gospel that goes on. How we hurt one another because, one is educated, one is not. The story. Movements are beautiful, but sometimes they have a lot of pain. So, Shireen, this is the practice that I'd like us to, I recommend we do as we build movements. It's not one that you do and finish. It's a one-off. It's not a one-off. It's continuous. So if you imagine a house and you sit and you say, as a movement, what are we doing? So you look at the status quo stuff, the things that we do that are known, they are written, they are documented. This is what movements do. And then you imagine a situation where we fear going into areas that are scary, which are kept in a room of fear, in a room that has got power dynamics, in a room that has got the past that has hurt us, in a room where we think some people are really dominant, in a room where we are carrying a lot of pain. Many times we fear going into this room. So one would, a movement would need a facilitated process where you enter this room, find the keys that you throw away, and really start asking, what is it that we are not talking about? What are the undiscussables? Where are all our wounds seated? What is it in this movement that we would rather avoid? Because really, if we go there, the movement might not happen. It might not happen. It might not happen. What power dynamics are we sitting on? What intersectional issues are we sitting on? What, dogs are not barking because we have made sure that they don't bark. Oh, am I speaking? What are we, what are we hiding? Instead of dealing with obvious things, yes, advocacy, yes, documentation, yes, storytelling, yes, all those are very important things. But unless we really break into this room that we fear going into, we've even thrown away keys. We don't, these are undiscussables. We are so scared. If we don't go into that room, the movements will continue to hurt us, they will continue to wound us, they will continue to drain us, and we are going to die angry. So this is a practice that can be embodied in our movements. Set aside time, and do this. It requires courage. It requires preparation to make sure that people don't kill one another. It requires, preparedness. It requires a good facilitator that will do it in such a way that we realize that, this is a very, very, very important process. Because without going deep into the things we've buried in a room, which room we don't open, we talk about it when we are not together, one-on-one. We talk about it quietly. We talk about it, or we even think about it. If we don't, yes, we can do all these things my sisters have talked about, but we can still leave the movement wounded, what I've called in the past, woundology. Symptoms of woundology that are passed on from generation to generation. So in short, building this imaginary house, looking at the status quo, the things we talk about every now and again, and the things we talk about, but go back, we talk about them, then we are scared, we go back, and then this room. And with that, then we can create an ideal room that we aspire, going to. This is a room where we increase our well-being, a room where we are able to talk about power dynamics, a room where we are able to talk about participation, where we talk about intergenerational issues, and where we talk about all the things that divide us. And I'll wind up by talking about Uganda, where issues of sexuality are really, really scary. And some of the people in the movement are scared about it, talking about it, but some have come and they are talking about it. So Uganda needs us as activists to open rooms and go there and ask how can we support, what issues are we not talking about, what are we afraid of, and that way we build better movements that are not wounded. So Shireen, avoiding woundology, symptoms of woundology in our movements is key, and increasing our well-being so that democracy starts within. As we talk about democracy outside, is one of the practices that I think we should embody as we go forward. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Hope. Thank you for that provocation and invitation. I think I'm hearing in what you're saying too, that as movement builders and as facilitators and supporters of movement processes, we have to acknowledge that we all live in, to use Audre Lorde's famous term, in the master's house. So we are all part of the very systems or the oppressive systems that we are trying to dismantle, and how it is that we do the work, right, within movement spaces to be able to not replicate the power dynamics and or the injuries that the system, right, inflicts on us is a critical part of movement work. And I would argue, given what has already been put on the table, can also be facilitated, right, using feminist popular education long-term process work that centers, right, the moving or the unlocking of the rooms that have been unlocked, Hope, to use your metaphor. I would like to invite Risha into the conversation. I think what Hope has put on the table is a challenging part of movement work. And Risha, I know that a large body of your work has really been centered, right, on dismantling or chipping away, right, at this master's house that we all live in a range of different ways, using a range of different feminist popular education processes and tools. So Risha, tell us, how do you incorporate particularly art, popular culture, and popular education in your movement work? And why and what does this bring or contribute to in our quest for a new world order?
Thank you, Shireen, for inviting me into this conversation. And just want to thank all the speakers before me for just the profound insights that they shared. And Hope, I just can't thank you enough for the very powerful metaphors that you brought, the movement as house that has fear in it, wounds in it, the house in which we die angry. And I just like, grappling with precisely many of those things, I would just sort of as an entry point into this particular segment, things that I want to share, I would want to offer another metaphor, which is of perhaps movement as a river. And I specifically want to kind of invite us to think about, that if we don't want to be doing that, that living in that fear and inflicting wounds on each other and dying angry, then could we imagine movement differently, a movement which is ever open, a movement where the movement of bodies in a protest or rally is connected in intimate ways with movement of bodies on stage, the movement of words on a page, the movement of moments in a story, the movement of strokes of a brush, the movement of dreams, the movement of our emotions. So what I am saying then is that that if political movement for justice is necessarily an ever-flowing movement of hearts, then it is the process. It is how we allow for that space for the hearts to move. That is where the process lies. That is where the work lies, and that is the space that we create for collective power to emerge, so that it doesn't harm us in the ways that Hope you were underlining so powerfully. And so for me, art then becomes inseparable from that process, which allows for that movement of hearts in a continuous way. And so art is about, we often talk about art as expression, art as vision. Art is also about connection and trust, because if we are living with all of those wounds and all of those contradictions, there are no pure identities. There are no fixed positions. We are just ridden with complexities. We are often carrying the baggages and burdens of inherited histories and geographies that are extremely violent. And so how do we carry it all and also be in relationship with one another? And so for those ambiguities, for those contradictions, for those vulnerabilities to be there as how we come together and how we move together, how we unbecome, unlearn in order to become and to learn, co-learn for justice, not only as humans, but also as more than humans or with more than humans. All of that is, I feel like that is what art can do. And it's about, so then how to be together in collectivity. And I'm going to go back to the point that I made earlier, while making sure that the individual is not stifled, the individual is not crushed in the collective, where there is that always ever-growing process of co-learning, of becoming, of sharpening in radical love. And so when we think of popular education, or if we want to think of popular education and how it can teach us to be the I, the we, the you, the they, sometimes it's the big I, sometimes it's the tiny I. This art is not something that is going to be taught in our departments. These are not arts that can be disciplined. These are this is art that has to also flow like a river, and it has to emerge with the energies, with the histories, geographies, with the learning, making mistakes, with forgiving each other, for so it's the egoless art. It's not the art with the big egos, and so in the work that I have done. Theater, protest, poetry, music, what can be written and what cannot be written, what can only be sung, what can only be felt. How do we make spaces for that? And so if we want to think about solidarity, then how can solidarity, how can this work in multiple sites be connected in a way that can be transformational, that people can sit with it, not to make them into experts who are going to go and lead, but also things that can actually do the deep work of transforming the heart. And I'll just give a couple of very quick examples. So I have been very fortunate to be closely connected with a movement of farmers and laborers in rural UP, a movement that has emerged from collective dreaming and collective moving over the last 25 years. But this work where people fight for their employment, for their rights to get employment as the poorest laborers and farmers, and also for their dignity as Dalit Mazdoors, Dalit farmers. For me, that it's not just enough to do the artwork or to do the collective work of movement building with them. How do we carry their energies and their epistemic interventions, the challenges that they offer to how we think and move together? How do I bring it into the urban areas, such as, for example, Lucknow or Bombay? And then we have thought about what kinds of texts, what kinds of work of art can allow us to make connections and to appreciate the rural manual workers and farmers as makers of important knowledge in terms of what justice can look like and what the processes for those justice can look like. And then for me, then again, the next step also has been then how do the students in, say, universities such as the one where I work in, the University of Minnesota, or for other many elite spaces or spaces that are disconnected from movement-based spaces, how do we do the work of popular education in such a way that the classroom itself becomes a movement, where the people who lead movements, who make sacrifices for movements, their interventions are not fixed as here are these moments that we can fix and learn from, but being in that mode, giving up, learning to do the work in the heart that would allow us to appreciate the processes of how those movements come to be. Another quick example I want to give is that you may all have heard about the ways in which Palestinian construction workers at this moment are being replaced by laborers from South Asia. So there are, big, massive groups of workers from different countries of South Asia that are being sent to Palestine at this time, and this is at the same time as no protests are allowed. Knowledge about what is happening in Palestine is hardly being circulated. But we did some work in the last couple of weeks where the Gaza monologues of Ashtar Theatre were translated informally. So this is not like some big event, but just doing the informal work of making these Gaza monologues available to the Mazdoors in the rural areas from where a lot of this recruitment is happening, and then to think together about what BDS means, and again having a multi-sided conversation with the Sathis, with the Mazdoors, with the manual laborers in these villages who are also leaders and visionaries of movements. And so again, the way in which we think about the very intimate realm of the heart, the way we think about domestic issues or local issues or regional issues, national issues or the global issues, I'm inviting us in these examples or in these thoughts to kind of break those borders, and that's how the movement works as a river, refusing those boundaries, refusing categories. So yeah, I guess in bringing these thoughts together, I would just say that what I'm really then after is sort of what I'm offering here is the power of radical vulnerability, where we make a commitment to become vulnerable together with all of our faults, all of our mistakes, all of our limitations, to realize a shared dream in which we have to all unbecome and become together. And for me, art can be that journey where everyone can become a leader and a follower, a teacher and a student, a poet, a singer, a dancer, a visionary, and also while understanding our own violence and limitations as humans in relation to more than humans, as we imagine what justice might look like.
Thank you, Risha. And as we imagine what knowing and learning and sharing looks like, right? Because I think as we think about feminist popular education, how we unlearn and how we flow together with collective knowledges of liberation and freedom and ways of being and doing, I think becomes critically important. We are heading into the final minutes of our conversation, as always, running out of time. But this is the beginning, perhaps, right, of a series of conversations on the meaning of movement building, on the meaning of FPE. I'd like to ask all of our panelists to turn their videos on. And we had a team who was curating some questions from the chat. Again, I'd like to direct people to the chat. There's some resources that will be shared, and a follow-up as well from this dialogue. But as a closing round, I'm going to just put out 3 curated questions from the chat, and I'd like to ask panelists to respond in a concise way, please, given time, to whatever question may move you, right? So the first one is, how can we grow movements over time that hold and offer transformative potential? And how does feminist popular education support this, right? So that's the first question. I think the second question that has come through the chat is, how do we both build across lines of difference and find ways to create change in our contexts? And the third question, how do we build power in times of repression? That's a big one. As you think about these questions, and then we're going to go into a quick round as part of closing, I've been struck, and Risha, you've put this in the space quite powerfully, along with a number of our other panelists, by how in many of the photographs that we've seen in the last couple days around the solidarity encampments by students, we are seeing workshops, teach-ins, reading circles, right, as part of that long tradition of learning together as central in building political formation and movements. And again, the use of the university as a site of activism. And there are many such sites, right? Not only the university that can be used. But back to the questions by way of closing. And we're going to start with you, Hope. So we're going to go back to a minute. Whichever question or set of questions you would like to respond to, your closing thoughts in relation to the questions.
Thanks, Sherry. I'll go back, to where I started. In my community, whenever people wanted to build something collective, they would identify the different talents in the community. They are singers, they are dancers, they are jesters, they are storytellers, they are people who, they are just farmers. Everyone brings whatever talent they have and they put it there. A chief is a chief, not because of power, because of what they bring into the community. So I come from that collective community, where we tend to do things together. So what I find missing in our movement is that the ability to sit and ask, where are the youth? Where is the voice of the youth? Where is the voice of the artists? Who are the dancers here? Who are the jesters? Who are those that contribute to, to cooking, just bring food? Who are those that remind us that we are not here because of us, but we are here because of everyone else? Who are those that break power dynamics? We don't have that. So I think that one of the things that Feminist Popular Education does is to ensure that, we have methods that invite everyone to participate. Unlike what happens in our movements where we tend to work with like-minded people. So let me leave it there because we don't have much time. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Hope. Risha, any one of the questions or all of the questions? Over to you in 1 minute.
I am thinking of, all of these questions in connection with one another, like the question about the lines of difference and how to think about power in time of repression. I really do believe that the only way to think about it is to continue to radicalize how we think of connection, how we think of connection in ways that can continuously challenge imposed categories. There was, I can't remember which speaker, but, I think maybe it was Laura who said something about how diversity is made into a problem. And so at the time when categories and identities are always imposed on us, we are continuously boxed in being this or that. I think it is about breaking those imposed categories and identities and finding the power of connection in which we can all flow together. That is the key to this breaking repressive power and moving across lines of difference.
Thank you so much, Risha, for those closing thoughts. Jojo, over to you. Last thoughts and comments in relation to some of the questions that have been asked.
Yes, I think as a dynamic organization, we should expect changes with various views. So let us be inclusive. But the most important is let us pause and ponder. As what the reminder from Hope said, some of us would be wounded. But I think the important point is to recognize our weaknesses, examine it, and to correct it. It will be our strength to check and correct our mistakes. And the tools of FPE can facilitate it and help us analyze and to move forward. And I think one of the most important element also of sustaining a movement is to take on the fervor and commitment of the youth, of the young people. As you said, we can observe them in the streets and they are very committed. And just like what in the Philippines, historically, they are the ones who also instigated this radical formation and activism.
Thank you so much, Jojo. And so let's go to you, Lara. Closing thoughts in relation to any of the questions.
I think that strengthening movements and movement building has to go through a process of agreements We can't build together if we don't have clarity about what brings us together and what unites us. I think the collective work of ethics is also a very important aspect when we talk about feminist popular education. Movements that want to transform the world can't exclude or act violently against certain segments of the population. Through ethics and practice, we can also build and strengthen movements. Gracias, Laura. Adelante, Kuntea. Muchas gracias, Shireen.
Gracias, Laura. Over to you, Kuntia.
Thank you, Shireen. I think I not repeat whatever I have said, but I just add that it's important for us to keep practice the feminist leadership principle, because I think sometimes we're not doing it enough, the reflection, and same like what Jojo has mentioned, that we not recognize our weakness and the ego that we have. And we need to look at beyond the ego that we have. We need to look into the common goal that we have, and we need to communicate. Sometimes we not communicate. Sometimes if we divide it among ourselves without really, reflect deeply about it. So I think this is important for us, and how we be transparent in the movement that we are in. So I think that is the most important to respond to all of those questions. Thank you, Shirley.
Thank you, Kuntia. And over to you, Mariela.
I see three things. In order to continue along the path for change, we need to bring together our own agenda with local, regional, and national agendas. We need to go beyond our silos. We need to go further. It's something we've always done as women, and we've always contributed in that way. I also think that we need to integrate a feminist perspective into the analysis used to create strategies, because sometimes those strategies don't take into account our dynamics, our knowledge, and our ways of life. They make us invisible. Sometimes those strategies don't take into account creativity, resistance, art, transformation. Those are all things that we contribute. That perspective can change the analysis. I also think we need to plant seeds of new leadership. And I think we need to acknowledge intergenerational leadership. Losing our historical memory, forgetting that we're part of a struggle that's been taking place for years, that others came before me, and that there are others that will continue with the struggle. That's part of an awareness that we're part of a historical struggle. That's something that gives us strength. And it can help us face any kind of challenge. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Mariela. I think there's so much more to be said, but we hope that in this dialogue, we've offered a set of thoughts around the interconnectedness of feminist popular education as a historical practice that has evolved, as Mariela has pointed to include feminist needs, demands, and approaches, to thinking about building movements and in service of transforming, right, not just who we are in the present, but transforming our world for future generations. I'd like to thank our panelists deeply for sharing your wisdom, your experience, your time with us. I'd also like to thank all of the participants who have attended. Thank you for engaging. Thank you for staying present. We look forward to continuing this conversation. You would see in the chat that we will soon be launching a guide that is rooted in feminist popular education approaches and principles, that is called Just Power. And we're really seeing this as being a contribution to movement work, but also thinking, right, for a broad cross-section of people who are committed to social change and social justice work in the world. So thank you to all of you for being present, for being engaged, for contributing to this conversation, and we look forward to more soon. So take care, be well, good morning, good evening, good night, good afternoon, depending on where you are calling from in the world. Take good care. It was lovely spending the last hour and a half in conversation with you all.